So what you see on the screen is when we take these classrooms and we get dozens of people around the world to watch them, and we say, what do these classrooms have in common that are growing student leadership? We see 6 practices that show up over and over and over. And I'm going to start with the bottom one. Connect. We develop trusting relationships that create diverse, sustainable coalitions. I want to stop here for a minute because this is different from, if anyone's familiar with the Teaching as Leadership rubric, we have a pillar there called investing. I invest my students' families in working with me, right? There's a whole lot of research out there about collaborating and connecting to students' families. What we're hearing from these teachers goes like this. You know, I know that it's important to connect with families. Often the way that I've been told to do that is I need to connect with them so that they can help me with my classroom management, and that they will receive my call if a student isn't doing something right, or that I can get them to help me do what I'm planning to do in the classroom. And the teachers are saying that that's not what I'm talking about here. If I'm growing student leadership, what I need to do is connect deeply enough with families so that I'm having a conversation about the purposes of education. What are we aiming for together? So it's not a question of I need to build relationships to convince something of someone. It's I need to build enough relationships so I can have an honest conversation about this child and what we aspire to together. That's a different kind of connecting. And I start with that because these teachers start with that. You saw what I didn't share the second video from Pooja. I hope you'll go see it. You will see how deeply she is connecting with students and their families. And it's not because she wants to convince them of something. It's because she wants to listen and have a conversation about what are we aiming for together. And that goes to the second piece, which is at the top of this circle, envision. I'm just going to say this as aggressively as I feel it. I don't care if you're teaching young kids, middle school kids, high school children. The question of what is education for has to be part of the conversation. And the students have to be part of that conversation. That in classrooms where we see students growing on these 4 outcomes, we see students and teachers having conversations about purpose. You saw in Pooja's video her talking about what are your dreams. That was an age-appropriate way to have conversations about purpose and envision the world of the future. Over on the left, there's 2 things here. A couple of you said, before we even shared any of this, a couple of you, maybe more than that, at the beginning shared something related, I think, to holding space. Again, I'm just going to tell stories. 18 months ago, almost 2 years ago, we asked every partner organization in Teach for All to send 2 of their strongest teachers, which we defined as classrooms where students seem to be growing as leaders, to a conference. They came to London. The teachers thought they were coming to a professional development conference, and it sort of was. But we were studying those teachers and asking them, what are you doing? What are you doing differently from what you were taught that's really making a difference? Here's what we kept hearing. These incredible teachers would say, well, you know, at my institute or at my university or on my rubric, it keeps challenging me on my instructional strategies and my classroom management strategies and how I lesson plan, and all that's important. But the reality is I'm spending as much time on creating the conditions, the space in which students can trust and learn from each other, as I am on lesson planning and instructional strategies. That I have to create not just the physical space, but the emotional space of trust so that students are genuinely learning from each other. And that takes work. And your rubrics are not encouraging that. Why not? Right? We really, with all these people around the world, we had a hard time finding a phrase to capture that. I think hold space feels a little odd to me, but that spirit of creating creating safe places to trust and fail is a lot of work, and there's ways teachers do it. And so we've got that here. That the next one, facilitate, that is the things that are often in our rubrics. You do have to lesson plan, right? We do have to be able to question, and instructional strategies matter. But the key here, I think, is the pair of those, that teachers who are actually concerned about growing students' leadership, their proficiencies, agencies, awareness, are putting a lot of time into how they create the opportunity for students to learn from each other. I'm going to move over to the right. I promise I'm going to get you all engaged with this, but I just want to keep telling the stories about the patterns that are coming out of these learning loops. Build expertise. I mean, I think probably, I don't know if there's some kind of like no kidding emoji to put in here. People will just say, well, no kidding. You have to know your content. If you're teaching math, you not only have to understand math, you've got to understand how your children misunderstand math. And that's work, and it matters. And many teacher excellence models, including some that I have worked on, stay neutral as to the content. But what we're hearing from the teachers that we've studied is, you know what, it took a while, but until I understood the content and understood how my students receive the content, I couldn't help them learn it in a way that grew their agency. Right? I could tell them the answers, I could tell them what they need to know, but if we're going to discover it together, I've really got to understand the content and understand how they learn it. And so growing student leadership on the path to chemistry or math or reading and writing, it requires just expertise in whatever your area is. And then that last one, this won't surprise any of you who are educators, we're just growing all the time. These teachers are saying, what a key factor in my students growing as leaders is me being a student with them. Like, my students know that I'm learning from them as they are learning from me. And that gives them power. That puts them in a position of thinking, yes, like I have agency, right? It increases the dispositions of growth mindset because I'm modeling it. This is the point where I wish we were all sitting around the table drinking coffee and we'd say, like, what do you think of all that? What I'm going to do in a second is share with you some of the concrete actions that these teachers say, and this is what this looks like in my classroom. I'm going to overwhelm you with this slide and take it away from you. It's a lot, but you'll have a little time for it. But right now, I just want to stop and slow down and ask a couple of questions. And I'm going to, there's 100 and something people here. If you want to come off mute, this is a good time, but also in the chat, what is your reaction to these things? I see some things that I'll have to catch up a little bit. But the questions I have for you are, does this resonate? Are these things that you are already doing and thinking, well, of course, do you disagree with some of these things? I'm especially curious, I would especially appreciate the courage of people to say, you know what, I think that's what my students need, but I'm not doing that. And here's why. Here's why that was hard. Because often the reaction we're having when we're sharing this is teachers saying, yeah, I feel the need to be that way, but ... And what are those things? What are the barriers to reimagining education in our daily actions? Again, I'm going to do one of these timeouts and take 60, 90 seconds for you just to think, read what your colleagues are saying. If someone wants to come off mute and share, I'd love it. But I'm going to be watching the chat too, just to see reactions. What are you thinking as you see these practices at a high altitude? And then we'll look at a lower altitude in just a moment. 2 different teachers in these studies, this was in London, they said, you know how some people say you have to shift from sage on the stage to guide on the side? Actually, an international phrase, but there was like this, and these 2 different teachers at different times said, I've always heard that, and I've thought, yeah, I'm trying to become guide on the side, but actually there's something else. And this goes to the point of student-centeredness is when I, as a teacher, am a learner. And those teachers were saying, it's when I design the lessons that we discover things together. I don't know the answers to them. That when we get to that point, that's when my students are learning the most, in part because they're seeing me learn and explore together with them. So I'm sorry, Annika, if that wasn't exactly the...
No, it was. It was just as a school leader to drive a teacher or teachers for that matter from teacher-centered to student-centered strategy. There are multiple levers that you have to keep pulling and pushing, and then the different aspects that you have to take care of. So I was just trying to envision what would that look like, and if I had to design my PD for them or learning experiences for them, what would that mean for me? But I hear you.
Yeah, well, and when I'm about to change the slide and give you some of the specific actions that these teachers have listed, take a look and you see if you find any of them helpful. I will also, this is getting ahead of ourselves, Annika, but when we have studied these, we call them transformational teachers. When we study these transformational teachers and we say, when you're not being that way, why not? Like, what's the but, ... But so often it's something internal. In fact, this happened in India. I was just telling you all this story. A year ago, working with some Teach for India staff and teachers, and we were talking about these things, and this, I believe he was a second-year teacher, said, I want to be the teacher that is truly a learner with the classroom. But when things start to go not well, when I start to get scared inside, I revert back to being the sage on the stage and taking over and taking control, because that feels safe to me. And when we explore why does that feel safe to you, it really comes down to because that's what the classrooms were like that he grew up in. Like, that is the internalized assumption about what learning is that it's from a teacher filling up the empty vessel of the student. The teachers that we're studying are saying that is not what grows students' agency and dispositions and proficiencies. It is when the students are taking ownership, and that means you have to let go and you have to unlearn some of what you have internalized about what teaching and learning is, because of course that's what you think. Every classroom you had, maybe, or most of them, were like that. And so that feels like the safe place. But if you will work through the fear, you will find that it's going to be great, right? It is going to be great.